I went for decades with this feeling that I was not quite doing something right. Is it okay that you started exploring non-classical realms? Is it okay that you just played with this hip hop band or this country band? Is it okay that now you're trying to compose music when you didn't go to school for it? Am I just failing to follow through the one thing that I maybe was supposed to be doing, which is be a violin soloist? But maybe the exploration is the thing, the act of exploring and the act of searching.
Hello, friends. It's me, Donnabelle, your host of another episode of To Hum is Human, the podcast where we explore the transformative power of tuning into our intuition to express our passionate purpose. In today's episode, The Sound of Purpose, How to Discover Your True Calling, we delve into what it means to attune to your inner voice and how collective creation and alternative approaches to education may open the door to greater artistic freedom. Whether you're a musician, a seeker, or someone simply longing to live more aligned with your truth, this conversation is an invitation to listen inward. I am so thrilled to introduce my next guest. Michi Wiancko is a multifaceted, imaginative composer, violinist, educator, and collaborator whose work bridges creative exploration, community resilience, and social change. A Juilliard graduate, an acclaimed soloist, she has performed with the LA and New York Philharmonics and toured with Silk Road and Rhiannon Giddens. Her commissions include works for Carnegie Hall's Ensemble Connect, Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, the Seattle and Boston Chamber Music Societies. Michi is also the artistic director of Antenna Cloud Farm, a Western Massachusetts-based music festival, artist retreat, and educational initiative. There she also leads the Experimental Institute, a tuition-free youth summer intensive focused on creativity, mentorship, and deinstitutionalized learning. Welcome, Michi.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's an honor to have you. You know, Michi, your work spans so many worlds: performance, composition, teaching, social impact. When did you first begin to sense that music would lead the way for you?
I started my musical journey from a very young age with the violin, but I did have very, very musical parents. I started playing the violin around the age of 3 and kept at it through thick and thin as a youth.
Yes.
And then I think, in high school, I realized I wanted to pursue music professionally. At that time, having taken private lessons and sort of come up in the classical pedagogical culture, even though I listened to lots and lots of non-classical music, it felt like there were only a few options for a violinist who wanted to become a professional. You could go for that elusive dream of being a soloist. You could try to join an orchestra, could maybe start a chamber ensemble, you could teach. But it was never I never dreamt that I never could have imagined where I ended up now. And I think it was really a journey of listening to little voices kind of tugging at me along the way. So I went to the I did my undergraduate degree at the Cleveland Institute of Music and was loving what I was doing. But I just had this feeling of like, there's some creative thing I want to do with music. I don't know what it is. I have no idea what this feeling, where it's coming from, what it means. All I know is that feeling just will not go away. There's some kind of music I want to be making that I'm not making, and I don't know what it is. And it kind of bothered me. It made me feel like self-doubt, like, am I in the wrong place? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I impatient? All this stuff. So I started improvising. I started exploring different ways. I sat in with a band or two. I kind of like just experimented. And that led me to really starting to expand my focus outside of the classical realm. And that's just an example, I think, of how my life and my career has been formed. I would say, like, the short version would be that whenever I felt that voice or some feeling tugging at me, no matter how small, I learned to really try to listen to it. I learned to recognize it as some kind of thing that was trying to get my attention. I learned to pay attention to it. I learned to like carve out intentional time and energy to really try to get what is at the bottom of this voice, you know?
Mm.
Like, am I
Well,
just hungry or
well, it's funny because you're speaking about sort of all these sensations. And when I think about music, and how that vibration that you're producing through an instrument, through your voice, through other means of making sound, it sort of fills the space, but
Mm.
it also resonates within your body. And I wondered, as you were composing or as you were playing, do you tune into how that sort of resonates within your body and directs you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it that I wasn't focused on that or I wasn't naming that or acknowledging it until later in life.
Mm.
You know, I think as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, I sort of took that all for granted. And it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe my 30s or even 40s that I started to really name it. I think the more teaching I do as well, and the more I realize, like, if we are not fully embodied while we do this, if we are not listening to ourselves on just a physical level, then we are not properly grounded to do any of this, you know, anything technical, any of this like difficult passage work with the left hand or whatever, you know, young artists or young performers are trying to accomplish with their instruments, you have to be fully embodied. Yeah. And so I think that this is a relatively new endeavor for me or area of exploration that the way that sound and resonates in our bodies and the benefit that it has for our bodies, especially in recent years, realizing that anybody who's performing, whether they like it or not, are kind of in the business of healing, kind of in you know, in the business of physical like therapy, sound therapy.
Yes. As a sound therapy practitioner myself and understanding how sound frequencies work in healing, sort of entrainment and resonance, there's something obviously to that because people have shown that it does, in fact, have palpable results within
Hmm.
the body. But I'd love to go back to how you sort of culled your inspiration for when you did compose music. Did you feel, did you, where did your inspiration come from?
So there is a tradition of like in the Baroque era of classical music. The Baroque era of classical music had a lot of performers who were also composers, performers who would also improvise on the spot. And that was really common. And I think it has now had a resurgence. It's more common, you know, in the classical world or the violin performance world for performers to, you know, play a little solo that they've written or improvise a section. But there was a period of time there where it was pretty strict, pretty structured. The idea of a classical music improvising would just like melt some people's faces off, you know, like
Yeah.
cause a lot of like deep anxiety because everybody's trained to just try to execute what's on the page as perfectly as possible and to uphold these old, you know, Eurocentric traditions and cultures just kind of mindlessly in some cases without really thinking about it. And so it was that trying to break out of those what felt to me like confined spaces. So I think starting to improvise not within any kind of genre, but actually like what kind of noises can I make on the instrument? What happens if I go and collect a bunch of twigs and pebbles and tap them on the bridge or the scroll or you know what how can I free this whole thing up? And so that's what sort of opened up a big creative door for me, which eventually led to composition, um, with the final sort of push that I needed coming from a friend who asked me to write her a piece. I was like, "What now? You want me to what?" I'm like, "Me? Are you sure?" She was like,
Ah.
"Yeah, oh my gosh, like, I heard the stuff that you're doing with
Mm.
your violin. I heard what you're doing when you play with bands, you know, can you write me a piece?" So I did, and that sort of was that started it all.
Sometimes it just takes a little push from someone,
Yep.
an outside influence to kind of get you out of that comfort zone. You're
Yeah.
like, "Can I?
Yeah.
Can I?" And of course and you did. So
Yep.
it was just a matter of sort of attuning to that and aligning to that.
Sure.
Michi, you've collaborated with an incredibly diverse range of artists and groups in various genres. How has working with others shaped and refined your understanding of how you express yourself?
I think working with others is where my real passion lies. There's so much commonality. I think embodiment is first and foremost that commonality, knowing that somebody else is also working with sound, as their medium and appreciating those vibrations. And I think musicians have a way of really connecting. Like we're so used to connecting with each other without having to use language, verbal language. It's just second nature. I think, yeah, collaborating with other musicians for sure is just pure fun usually. I also love, I think, collaborating with non-musicians, with visual artists, with filmmakers, dancers, choreographers. That's also been incredible just to see, just to learn about other people's relationships to their own practices, the ways in which a filmmaker would describe something musical that they want. They're going to use like just a whole completely different language than how a musician would talk about it. And I find that so incredibly fascinating. Yeah, but I think ultimately connecting with others and exploring that connection and then sharing that connection with an audience, I think is one of the most important functions of art.
Oh gosh, I'm absolutely with you there. But I'm curious in terms of, say, when you're performing. So there's must be a very different feeling when you're performing as a soloist versus performing collaboratively with other
Mhm.
artists. Do you sort of tune into a different aspect of yourself,
Oh,
or is
yeah.
it sort of the same part? Just
Yeah, I think I do tune into it feels like I'm collaborating with myself, I suppose. And it's changed very dramatically for me because for a while I was playing the role, so to speak, of a violin soloist for my career. And I'm very fortunate to have been in that position, even though ultimately I did not find it satisfying. I found it lonely.
yes.
I found it it's very, very, very high pressure. It's very high stakes, high pressure. Like you miss a note, you miss a couple notes, or you play something slightly out of tune, and you're like, okay, that might have been it. That might be my career. Like that's that kind of pressure. And I was meeting those challenges for a really long time. And then I discovered like, wow, this is actually beginning, even though I love the repertoire, I love the violin concertos, I loved playing with symphonies, but something was amiss for sure because I was so stressed out all the time about it that it was really blocking me physically from being able to like gain the benefits of the sound, and of the music making. But what I've so in sort of a therapeutic effort to be able to play solo violin without that kind of, challenge, that level of challenge and pressure attached to it, I started using effects pedals and using an electric violin, or at least plugging in an acoustic violin electrically, and putting on solo shows where I combine pre-written material that I've made for myself with just pure improvisation that stems from the energy I'm feeling in the room. I haven't done it in a little while, but it's definitely it's percolating that is something that I would like to do more. So when I'm doing that, I've discovered one of my happy places where I feel the most free, especially if there's no written music in front of me. Then it just feels like kind of pure communing with other
Channeling.
people. Yeah.
Channeling. And you're,
Yeah.
in essence, having a concert with yourself, like sort of your multidimensional selves when you're
Yeah.
playing the layering. I can only imagine the sort
Yeah.
of depth in that
Yep.
performance, even though there's only one you on the stage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that for me, playing with time, utilizing silence, which I'm a big fan of as a musician, like the rests in between the notes are just as important as the notes themselves. I tell my students that constantly. So to kind of be able to, yeah, to shift time and to have that happen in a collective space with other people, I think can be really, I've had some pretty powerful and emotional experiences, just feeling it almost feels interactive. Even though the audience is just sitting there watching, I can feel energy happening that makes it feel like this is a definitely an interactive situation.
Well, and I just love how you're sort of creating these spaces. And I would love to talk about how you were pulled to create the antenna cloud farm.
Yeah. Um, I this idea came to me randomly while I was pumping gas at a gas station. I remember the exact moment. I think the tank was done filling and I just kept standing there. My husband was like, "Are you okay?" Um,
I'm getting a download.
what's that?
I'm getting a download. Hold
Yeah,
on.
exactly. I'm not available to talk right now. We were kind of in a transition of moving up here gradually, kind of inching our way up to Franklin County from Brooklyn,
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
where yeah, where we had lived for a long time. My husband's from New York. And I really wanted to leave the city. We wanted to come to Massachusetts. We were really drawn to this part of the state, gorgeousness and really cool stuff happening, really cool arts, really cool cultural stuff, farming, agricultural stuff, which we found really amazing. And I was fearful of leaving my artistic community in New York. I was fearful of feeling lonely, feeling isolated as an artist. So I thought, well, what if we found a space that we could bring people to, and we can bring our friends to, or colleagues to enjoy the beauty of Western Massachusetts, have a retreat from the city and have like an artistic retreat. And what if we stuck a concert onto that? And then what if we sent those musicians into like local schools to hang out with the music class, or give a performance at the school? So it just kept growing. It actually grew quite fast. I say it grew incrementally, but by year 2 I was giving like 10 concerts every other weekend for like 3 4 months
wow.
straight. It was
My
crazy.
goodness.
And yeah, it's just it's a labor of love. It's now grown into something where we have, it's not just our friends. It's a combination of artists that come from near and far, hyper local or sometimes international, and artists who are really doing something powerful and interesting and innovative and different with their practice, with their instruments, with their mediums. And yeah, it's a labor of love. It's a work in progress, and I think it's always going to be. I think it's always shifting, and that's become something I'm pretty proud of. That is just constantly in evolution and constantly in a state of growth and responsiveness to the world and to artists' needs, to our local communities' needs. So we're quite a robust partnership organization. Lots of various types of programs now that are stemming from Antenna Cloud Farm, and lots of different kinds of engagement. So,
Could you tell our listeners just briefly what Antenna Cloud Farm is? First of all, I want to know where the name came from, because it's
well,
just so compelling. I'm like, woo, I'm so curious already. I don't even know what it is.
that's funny. Well,
Yeah.
we're located on a hill. For any geologists out there, it's the Drumlin, which is a hill that's, the result of some big glacial movements. But it's a former dairy farm, and we're lucky to have this gorgeous view of the valley. And I think I kind of dreamt up the word antenna because a lot of I think when people heard especially our New York friends, when they're like, "You're going to move where?" Like New Yorkers are just, most of them can't fathom ever living anywhere other than New York, or, it's just,
Right.
it's tough to leave.
It is.
It's a city that very much draws you in, and we still
Mhm.
love it. New
Mhm.
Yorkers don't get mad at me. But they were like, "Oh, you're kind of going, you're going to move to the middle of nowhere to raise a family," and just kind of, we're like, "Actually, we're coming out here to be even more expansive and to be more outward facing. It's not a retirement plan. This is a very intentional,
Right.
community facing." And so I have this old black and white photograph of a person who's got huge headphones on and is holding a little satellite dish. I think it's a microphone. It's like from the 60s or something.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the person is I believe, an ornithologist, or like a bird, is listening to birds
Yes.
and
Oh, I love that.
capturing those sounds. And it's a really cool photograph of this person just sitting, standing on the edge of a hill, holding this antenna out to the valley. And
Mhm.
so that's really where the word antenna came from, this idea that the outward facing, community facing, expansive. And
receiver.
then clouds, just because we feel close to the clouds up here, and watching the patterns of weather and clouds come in and out is a big activity for anybody who's up here.
How big is it? How big is your property?
We're on 100 acres.
Oh.
Yep. With some of it wooded, some of it open, some of it we're putting into conservation. A lot of it is hosts a large flock of sheep from farmer friends who practice regenerative and sustainable agriculture locally here. So it's been wonderful to learn, really inspiring, and we're really grateful to have learned so much about the local agricultural culture here as well. And just so grateful to know where our food comes from.
Yes. Well, so, aside from inviting, highly accomplished musicians, but you also invite people of all levels sort of within their practice, it sounds like. So that,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the performances, people who come up here to perform are very, you know, everybody's carefully selected in that we want the artists who come up here to sort of embody the holistic um, nature of what we're doing. We're very much rooted in bartering and mutual aid, and very much like we do not operate in a purely transactional way. We try to approach everything as holistically as possible. So, but there's also an institute, the Experimental Institute.
yes, I wanted to talk about that a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are lots of one of my dreams is to have a youth music camp for, junior high age or high school age musicians to come up here. But
I have a
for
feeling that's
now,
gonna happen for sure. All these bubbling ideas,
yeah,
like, it's just they're percolating, but they're like, it sounds like just from the get-go, from the idea at the gas station that you knew you were onto something because it just started growing all of a sudden. It's almost like you tapped into this sort of vein that just became like this living project, and it sounds like
exactly.
it's constantly
Yeah.
evolving. Now, I'm curious because you were mentioning sort of the agricultural aspect of the location itself, but I know that you do partner with several organizations and you deal with sort of social, racial, food, and climate justice. How did that become a part of sort of the vision of Antenna Cloud Farm?
I think we're first of all so lucky to be in this part of the country and this part of the state where it's rich with people who are out there using their mediums or their crafts or their organizations or their kind of focal points, whether it's climate activists or farmers, to really kind of revolve, their work around community health, community wellness, community resilience. There's so much of that happening from so many different angles. And so I think finding that common ground with other organizations and other entities outside of music has been, first of all, very gratifying, just because I love to learn.
Yes.
And so that, I've learned so much about other areas of work and of life. But it came about in just meeting people and hanging out and making connections, listening to noticing when there's kinship and following up with that, just building community, which can mean so many things. And, that's a term that's used so much, but it really is what it feels like. Building a community, building a network that's not for just the sake of bettering or furthering one's own career, but a network that is grown and sustained in order to provide resilience, to be a place for us all to find support in when it's needed.
So valuable, especially around these times, to
Yeah.
just be in sort of a safe space. It sounds like
Mhm.
a very safe space too. And, you speak about community, but I'm curious, what have you witnessed sort of on the an individual level when others step into a space like Antenna?
Yeah. I don't want to brag.
Oh, please,
Like,
please,
how
this
can
is
I
the
say
place.
this without bragging?
This is the
So,
place. Yes,
I'll talk about the Experimental Institute,
please. Mhm.
because that's something that every year we're entering our fourth season this coming summer of the Experimental Institute. And this is a early career activist performers or young musicians or composers or music creators who are passionate about using their art for the betterment of society, really, is what that is. People who are community oriented and who have a vision, not just for themselves and their own careers, but a vision for their communities. So those are the kinds of people that we are inviting into the cohort here. And because of that, we thought after year one, we thought it was a fluke. We were like, first of all, that was too good to be true. It was as soon as everybody stepped foot here, the energy was just electric. And it was like everybody had, because we had fashioned the application process towards, artists like the ones I just described, as opposed to what's more standard, which is how impressive is your resume? Like what are the big institutions? Did you make your debut at Carnegie Hall? This kind of stuff. And so I think the moment, representation is very important here. So the faculty and the mentors and the people who are helping, behind the scenes or whatever, it's like a very, very, very diverse group of individuals. The cohort itself is very diverse in literally every single way, every single definition of that word. And we tried very mindfully to curate the time together in a way that opened up the space, allowing for people to feel safe and to feel vulnerable. I think one way we did that was by being vulnerable ourselves, as the so-called faculty group, and to make it really clear that being vulnerable is a really powerful, productive, generative space to be in, uh, if it's truly a safe space to do so. So I think that all of that, plus this idea that when we're all here, it is a sort of communal living situation for the most part. We take turns getting ready for meals. We take turns cleaning up. Ideally, on day 3 or day 4 of a 10-day session, we're trying to facilitate enough comfort and familiarity and sort of individual empowerment that the young artists or the fellows start feeling empowered to curate something themselves or to run a class. It can be experimental or run some kind of embodiment session or movement session or something that they want to play around with. So yeah, it's quite multifaceted. And that's also something that's changing and growing and evolving each year as well.
Mm. It sounds like such a rich environment for creativity. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I think of that movie, the baseball movie, they're like, if you build it, they will
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
Like you're literally on a farm and you're creating this space. But there's something I would love to talk about because you've embraced what you call deinstitutionalized learning and sort of stepping outside the traditional systems to learn and grow. Where did that come from and how does that show up in
Mhm.
your space?
Yeah. I'm always playing around with language too. We're always kind of talking about how, so yeah. So deinstitutionalized learning is something I might change that. I don't know. I think I added that um, I added that word to some of our materials last year because I was like, that is, one thing that we are doing. But that came from a lot of experiences that, my collaborators, my co-directors of the Institute, and I have had a lot of experience in institutions, in educational institutions, institutional settings, and still do. And this comes from just hands-on, like lived experience in music conservatories and institutions, and seeing, not to be totally negative about it, but seeing and kind of studying really closely the ways in which those institutions were not serving the students in a way that was truly preparing them for the real world, to become, like, for what it means to be a professional musician, or even what it means to just be an awake, aware,
Human,
engaged person in the world.
right?
We were witnessing a lot of like institutional failure, I think, and an inability to be nimble and responsive, inability to bust out of the rigorous, structures that are so old and so outdated and outmoded, but yet, and everybody knows it, but yet the job requires a buy-in of sorts, even if you're going through the motions. And so what I found so much was just a sort of almost just like a disembodied culture in a lot of institutions. And you have your wonderful gems that, the teachers who are just changing students' lives and doing amazing work despite the structure, despite the system that they have to be a part of. But my colleagues and I, we spent quite a few years, like through the pandemic, we met weekly, talked for hours about all of these kinds of things, about a lot of the issues that we were seeing. And a lot of those issues became more transparent during COVID, during the lockdown. A lot of veils were lifted, a lot of smoke sort of cleared. And we were like,
Absolutely.
wow, it really came down to this, and it was eye-opening, very, very educational. And so in some ways, this institute really came out of that. It really came out of like, okay, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? What can we do as, quite experienced musicians and educators now? What can we build that would allow us to build some kind of system or structure from the ground up, rather than trying to go in and retrofit something that honestly will not change.
It doesn't really work for
It
everyone.
doesn't really work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that what can we generate to hold all these ideas? And that's why we called it the Experimental Institute. Some people think it's because we're playing experimental music, when they're not wrong. Sometimes we are. But it's more like, can we experiment with a new kind of institution, a new kind of and a new idea of what an institution could be?
What does that look like? So what does a typical week in the Experimental Institute?
A typical week, well, everybody shows up in the late afternoon and we have a huge festive meal. We tour the property, we talk, we sometimes get our instruments out and we'll do some, I call them musical greetings. You can grab your instrument, you can grab a tin can. We're going to go around in a circle and you can make any noise, any sound that represents perhaps how you're feeling in that moment. It's very, very free and open. So we do a lot of these my colleagues and I kind of each have a bunch of things that we like to do. So we take turns facilitating sessions that start generating some feelings of openness and allowing for people to really start to get to know each other and to really start to share deeply about what they do, what they're into, why they do what they do. And then for the next few days, it's a very organized, very carefully curated curriculum that each year is a little different. There's just some ebb and flow, some give and take, just because usually there's way more that we want to do than we end up having time to do, because we're also trying to allow for rest. Sometimes we all go on a group hike through the
Uh,
woods
I
or
love that.
visit the river, or, but it's a combination of discussion, writing prompts, journaling, playing music for each other, creating music together, having workshop sessions where we talk about the way that music is made, or we talk about what each person is experiencing in their schools or their workplace or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of therapy kind of sessions, end up feeling
Sharing.
like therapy,
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah.
A lot of exploration, a lot of physical movement stuff, and then that interspersed with and also the respect for alone time, a respect for solitude and quiet, and sort of letting everybody's nervous systems reset. So we have pages and pages and pages where we just we really try to strike that balance throughout the
Mm.
week.
I mean, what I'm noticing is it is a very holistic approach
Mm.
to how music is made, the creation of the music, and sort of what that means, what that entails. And it's sort of a living thing. You are sort of bringing to form and expressing something within yourself through an instrument, through sound, through your voice, but also engaging in the landscape. So you're creating a soundscape within a landscape, but also in your mind, which is your body, which is how you interact with the world. I think that's a very much needed, but right now, really a unique approach to learning.
Yeah, I think it is unique. And the more we're in it and the more we're building it, the more it becomes normalized for us. So then when I do a lot of sort of guest teaching or guest coaching in different schools and institutions around the country, I'm always kind of surprised, like, oh yeah, that's right. This is unusual. And a lot of sometimes it's just somebody sharing something that they made that a professor or somebody from their institution told them is not quote, how things are done, and then having a lot of self-doubt about like, is this okay what I made and how I made it? It's different, it's unusual, and it hasn't really been done before. Is this okay? I'm being told it's not okay. So then bring us into the picture, and we just dive right into that idea. And it's always because of the people who are coming here. It's always a wonderful, amazing idea. So we're very affirming. And I think we provide each other with that kind of support and affirmation to be like, no, even like the fact this has never been done is a good thing, so follow that instinct. So
Yes.
there's
I love
it's
that.
like a big support group, really.
Oh my goodness. And and I can imagine after attending this and participating in this, that what then they bring out into the world becomes sort of a shift, perhaps,
Yeah.
in sort of that paradigm
Yeah.
and ways in which they think about themselves and perhaps, what they choose to take in and what they choose to
Yep.
sort of leave behind.
After year 2, I think that the moment I realized, really felt deeply how powerful this was, because I think I wasn't allowing myself to fully I was like, "This, I think, is a fluke," you
Yeah.
know? I think it
There
was
are
just
no
happened to be a magical
coincidences.
thing.
No, there are no
The
coincidences.
moment it dawned on me, the moment I really realized it, and I just immediately started crying, was when I began to see that fellows who came here who are in different cohorts, different years, we're now finding each other out in the real world and building things together, or meeting for the first time and immediately feeling a sense of connection and closeness because of coming from here and having this in common. And they were telling me, the same, like the fellows who have been here have given a lot of feedback that is quite moving about the impact that this has had in their lives. So,
I just get chills about that. I mean, it just shows really that the truest creativity is one that inspires even more creativity.
yeah.
And it just expands even further, far reaching. So you're doing something, you're onto something, and that's just pure magic. And I feel like
Yeah.
magic is made at the Antenna
Yeah.
Cloud
Thank
Farm.
you so much.
But, sometimes it's understood that, our purpose is something that just we find once and we hold on to it forever. But your journey seems to be one of constant evolution.
Mm.
How has your sense of purpose shifted or expanded over time?
Oh, I love that question so much.
Mhm.
Because it really touches on, I mean, it's a weird, it's very personal. It's a very personal thing to share, but I think it's really important potentially, especially if there's, younger person listening to this asking a lot of similar questions. I went for decades with this feeling that I was not quite doing something right, or that I was failing to stick with just the thing. And it was sort of a self-sabotage so much as this little self-doubt. I mean, I'm also a very confident person and, was very proud of what I was doing, but there's always this tiny, tiny little voice was like questioning. Is it okay that you sort of started, exploring non-classical realms? Is it okay that you just played with this crazy hip hop band or this country band or, is it okay that now you're trying to compose music when you didn't go to school for it? And all these questions of like, I don't know if that's okay. Like I feel like I'm failing to stick with the one thing, am I just failing to follow through the one thing that I maybe was supposed to be doing, which is be a violin soloist? And I see other friends who stuck, other colleagues, other people I went to music school with who stuck with their thing, and they're, hugely successful doing awesome stuff, but they stuck with the one thing. And it was a couple of years ago, I was talking to my husband, Judd, who's also a composer and musician. And we were just talking about this. And he was like, but maybe the exploration that you is just a regular part of your life is the thing, that the act of exploring and the act of searching and the act of responding to, the energies and the voices, whether they're stemming from internally or externally, that act of continuously evolving and growing, like maybe that is the thing. And that just shifted. Something clicked, finally.
Mm.
Something
Mm.
clicked. And I no longer have that voice. I have that voice in other areas, maybe, but, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, Yeah,
But
we get all sorts of nudges,
yeah,
and I feel like you took the stronger nudge and it felt very natural, and obviously then it started becoming this other thing, which is now feeling like it's just growing and expanding, and you're on the right track when
yeah,
something feels so good
yeah.
within you, and then who it affects also feels this sort of beautiful nudge to keep creating. If there's a listener out there, sort of either a young listener who's I wouldn't say entertain. So someone listening right now who feels the quiet hum of something inside them but hasn't yet found the courage to
Mm.
express it, what would you offer them?
I would encourage them to not bury it, to not try to let it go, to try different ways of listening to it, perhaps, you know, go for a walk in a beautiful place, move your body, go visit some place you haven't been before, bring a journal, write about it, try to release it some way, try to name it, try to know what it is. Trial and error is sometimes part of it. Sometimes you try a thing and you're like, you know what? That wasn't actually it.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Um, but I think this idea that the idea of trusting ourselves and respecting how we feel personally about things, I think that's hard to teach. And I think it's not something that, society does well for our younger people. I think we have to figure out how to build that for ourselves. How do we trust ourselves? How do we listen to our own voices above? How do we let our own internal voices be louder than any external voices that might be planting seeds of doubt or seeds of fear? How do we stay true to ourselves? Those are really tough questions. And I think that my advice would be to not just search for the answers, but just to keep asking the question. I think if the questions can be normalized in life, just keep asking the questions and be comfortable being in a state of asking questions and let that be the normal. Answers do start to emerge here and there, but maybe the goal is not to find answers to every single question. Maybe the goal is to really explore the questions.
love that. It's so beautiful and powerful and really, giving yourself permission
Mhm.
to be receptive to things that you may not have considered
Exactly.
in your path. What's in the future for you? What's next coming up that you're really excited about?
Specifically, would like I have sort of a goal of becoming more connected to my violin, meaning playing some more shows. I haven't played a show in a while, developing a solo set, perhaps recording a new album. All of this I've had to put on the back burner for a few years because I'm lucky enough to be commissioned by other people to write music, but I'm trying so hard to carve out space, a space that I would consider just my ultimate space of creative freedom, which would be not a commission, just something I'm creating just for the sake of creating it. So that's what I'm hoping is in my personal future for my own. And for ACF, there's been so much growth. We're slowly expanding our summer festival so that there's also engagements that happen during the school year. We've formed a lot of new partnerships with local schools, local public schools, and music programs. And also we're hosting retreats for non-public facing retreats for artists who are working on some really incredible projects. So there's never a dull moment. There's never not anything going on.
Right? Right. Well, how do folks connect with you and what you're doing? Are there particular places you want them to go to find out
Yeah, I mean, they could visit antennacloudfarm.com. I would highly recommend signing up for our newsletter, which I'm very proud of. I think it's really beautiful. It's very, very thoughtfully and lovingly put together. In our non-summer season, it goes out maybe once a month, once every couple months, and then during the summer, more frequently when things are starting to happen. Yeah, but I would recommend checking out our newsletter.
and can they check you out personally? Is there
Yes.
a site where they can
Yep.
go to see what you do?
They can go to michiwiancko.com or they can find me on Instagram, which is where I'm more likely to have like updated events and concerts. These days it's a lot of like concerts that are featuring works that I've written, but my website has my works list on it, ways to purchase my music that I've written, fun videos, things like that.
Oh my gosh. Michi Wiancko, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, your vulnerability. I mean, I feel like that was such a generous way in which you've told your story today. And, you're basically showing us that the purpose isn't the destination.
Mm.
It's a resonance we return to again and again. And I know that so much of what we spoke about today will resonate for our listeners. And, your work just reaches way beyond this area.
Oh,
And
well,
I'm so thankful.
thank you. It was truly wonderful to talk to you. I appreciate you so much.
Let's support each other.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
Thanks for being here. I hope something from today's conversation stayed with you or gave you a new way to look at things. That awareness, that pause, that's where things start to shift. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might need it. You can learn more about my work and what's coming up at sonorous.light.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at @tohumIsHuman. Until next time, keep humming.